I see that. All right, open your Bibles to 1 Peter chapter 3. We're also going to be primarily looking at Genesis chapter 12 this morning. But we'll start in 1 Peter 3 for our foundation for our start. 1 Peter 3 verse 1. Wives, likewise, be submissive to your own husbands, that even if some do not obey the word, they, without a word, may be won by the conduct of their wives, when they observe your chaste conduct accompanied by fear. Do not let your adornment be merely outward, arranging the hair, wearing gold, or putting on a fine apparel. Rather, let it be the hidden person of the heart, with the incorruptible beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is very precious in the sight of God. For in this manner, in former times, the holy women who trusted in God also adorned themselves, being submissive to their own husbands, as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose daughters you are, if you do good and are not afraid with any terror. 1 Peter 3 opens with the instructions to wives regarding what is probably the more difficult situation when the Bible calls wives to submit to their husbands. And that is, what if the husband is acting in an unbiblical or unfaithful manner? Not unfaithful to the marriage vows, necessarily of course, but unfaithful to God. So what happens if the husband is not obeying the word? And when we get down to verse 6, Peter uses Sarah from the Old Testament as an example. As Sarah obeyed Abraham. So here's a question to start us off with. What is Sarah's, I don't want to say reputation, but what is Sarah known for? Tell me something you know about Sarah, Abraham's wife, other than she's Abraham's wife. What do you remember about her? Kim?
Twice she posed as his sister to join parents.
Twice Abraham asks her to tell people that she's his sister, and twice she goes along with it, and the first one is the one we're going to be looking at this morning in Genesis 12.
True though, wasn't it?
I'm sorry?
It was half true, wasn't it?
It is half true. Well, it is completely true in a sense. She is his sister in that she is his half sister, right? She's the daughter of my, what does he say? The daughter of my mother, but not the daughter of my father, or the other way around. I can't remember which one. But we'll come to it here. So, it's not a lie. It's just not telling the whole truth. You know, when you get on the stand in American courts, you raise your right hand and you swear to do what? To tell the truth, the whole truth. Right? Well, okay, Sarah doesn't exactly pass that test because Abraham asked her not to. We'll cover that in a second. Now, by the way, just as a little, because I know this is on some of your minds, is Sarah lying when she does this? The answer is no, she's not lying. And sometimes it's not wrong to conceal the truth. But we're going to look at the motives behind it this morning, particularly Abraham's. What else do you know about Sarah?
She didn't believe Abraham. She did not believe Abraham when he said that the Lord told him that he'd be the father of many nations and that they would have their son Isaac.
Oh yeah, when God comes to Abraham and says, Sarah's going to have a son. By you, by Abraham. And eventually Sarah says, okay, look, maybe our signals got crossed. Here's the concubine, Hagar. Maybe that's what God wants. And then later on, when she is 90 years old, God comes and says, this time next year, Sarah's going to have a son. And she what?
She laughed at it.
She laughs. Yeah. And you have to understand, it's a little bit cynical laugh. Really? You know, she's never been able to have kids. She's been barren, right? Now she's 90. Okay, and you're going to have a son next year. Anything else about Sarah that you remember?
No, she was beautiful.
Ah, she's beautiful. You know, we don't have exact chronology, but the best we can tell, the events of Genesis 12 happen when she's about 60. Now, Abram himself lives to be 140. I think he remarries at like 115 and has like 3 or 4 more kids by his next wife. So, you know, we think, okay, 70, you're dead, 80, you're dead, 90, you're dead, but okay, when the guy lives to be 100 and whatever, 140, let's say I was right, and remarries and has kids at 115, 120, obviously lifespans are still a little bit longer at this point in time. But let's say her 60 is our 40. So she's 40 years old and she's considered to be very beautiful. Anything else about Sarah? Okay. So, here's my point. When Peter says, wives, be submissive to your own husbands, even if they do not obey the word, that you without a word may win your husband. And then in verse 6 says, even as Sarah obeyed Abraham. And he uses Sarah as an example. How many of you would have thought of Sarah as an example of someone who followed her husband, obeyed him, so much so that she stands out as the exemplar of faith? We don't typically think of Sarah as being strong in faith. But that's exactly what Peter is telling us in 1 Peter 3. And there's a reason for that, and it stems from the event of Genesis chapter 12. So, open your Bibles if you have not already. Genesis chapter 12. Now in Genesis 12, their names are Abram, and if you pronounce it correctly, Sarai. But no, and people in America, we say Sarai, but technically it's Sarai. But rather than say Abram and Sarai all day long, I'm just going to say Abraham and Sarah for just recognition, okay? But Genesis 12, starting in verse 1. Now the Lord had said to Abraham, get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house, to a land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Now, I think Abraham, or Abram at this point, has to understand that this is more than just God saying to him, I'm going to make somebody great out of you. When he says, in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed, Abram, or Abraham at this point, has to understand that there is a spiritual connotation involved here. And indeed, as we go along, we see that that's exactly what Abraham understands. That the promise made to Adam and Eve, that from the seed of the woman would come the one who would crush the head of the serpent, this promise to mankind is now being fulfilled or will be traced from Abram's descendants. Problem? They have no children. And Sarah is incapable of having children. So we read in verse 4, Abram departed as the Lord had spoken to him, Lot with him. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Then Abram took Sarai, or Sarai, his wife, and Lot, his brother's son, all their possessions that they had gathered, and the people whom they had acquired in Haran, and they departed to go to the land of Canaan. All right. Abram at that point in time starts off in the Ur of the Chaldees. He lives in the area known as Haran, and at that point that's a modern day equivalent of living in, let's say a really nice area just outside Boston. You know, you got all the amenities of a large city, you've got civilization, and so picture somebody, if you will, living just outside Boston in, say, the 1850s. And God appears to them and says, go to Canaan. And when you get there, you're going to live in a tent, and you're going to be a nomad. So they're going from a nice colonial home to living in a tent. I don't imagine Sarah was necessarily fond of this idea, but the story goes on. So when they get there, verse 7, the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your descendants I will give this land. And there he built an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. We're going to jump down to verse 10. Now there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to dwell there, for the famine was severe in the land. And it came to pass, when he was close to entering Egypt, that he said to Sarah his wife, indeed, I know that you are a woman of beautiful countenance. Therefore it will happen, when the Egyptians see you, that they will say, this is his wife, and they will kill me, but they will let you live. Please say you are my sister, that it may be well with me for your sake, and that I may live because of you. So it was, when Abram came into Egypt, that the Egyptians saw the woman, that she was very beautiful. The princes of Pharaoh also saw her, and commended her to Pharaoh. And the woman was taken to Pharaoh's house. He treated Abram well for her sake. He had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male and female servants, female donkeys and camels. But the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarah, Abram's wife. Pharaoh called Abram and said, what is this you have done? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say, she is my sister? I might have taken her as my wife. Now, therefore, here is your wife. Take her and go your way. So Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had. All right, I find it helpful when you deal with an Old Testament story like this to break it up into scenes, like a movie script. Okay? So we're going to start with what are the elements of a good movie? What are some elements of a really good movie? A really good movie. No theater buffs? No playwrights?
Thematic of it.
I'm sorry?
Tension and suspense.
Good guy in a man.
Okay, you've got tension, suspense, conflict.
Cinematic, beautiful area.
You've got cinematic description, right?
A protagonist and an antagonist.
Generally, you have a protagonist, an antagonist, sometimes more than one. Although modern movies tend to have, instead of heroes, they have anti-heroes. But you know, is Batman the protagonist or the antagonist? We talked about that a couple weeks ago. Okay. You start off with, however, something that's going to introduce your characters to you. You have to know who they are. So somewhere along the line, the movie will usually open with something that will begin to let you realize who you're dealing with. there's characterization. And movies don't tell you the person's character. They show you the person's character. By their actions, by their words, you begin to figure out, oh, this guy is trustworthy, this guy's a liar, this guy is, weak, this guy is, untrustworthy or whatever. And by their actions, you begin to figure out their characters. Then you get your opening tension. Something is not right. And then that tension builds to a conflict until finally you have a confrontation and then resolution. At least you hope. A movie without resolution is a movie where you throw something at the TV screen and say, what? Because they don't tell you how it ends. They just leave you hanging. Okay. But generally speaking, there's resolution, and then out of that, you get an idea of how everything is going to flow from there. All right. So our prologue is basically verses 1 through 9. God calls Abram. Abram picks up his family, his possessions, his wife, all that he has. He leaves his home. He gets this promise from God that he is going to be a blessing to the entire world. And then he goes and moves to Canaan. Now, where's the beginning tension? Well, starting in verse 10, there's a famine in the land. A severe famine in the land. What's Abram going to do? How is he going to respond? Okay, he goes to Egypt. Now, we see that the opening tension is only preparing you for the next higher bit of conflict, which is they're about to go into a pagan nation, and Abram says, look, these people don't know God. They're going to kill me to take you. So tell everybody that you're my sister, which is true as far as it goes. But don't tell them you're my wife, because otherwise they'll kill me, and then they'll take you, and I'm toast, and you're a captive. So it's better for you to at least, run the risk and me stay alive. So then you get the next level of conflict, and then finally you get the confrontation of characters. Pharaoh and Abram. Why didn't you tell me? Okay, so Pharaoh figures out what's going on. And then the resolution. Pharaoh gives Sarah back. He rewards Abram, basically he bribes him and sends him away. Okay? Let's start with scene 1 of the beginning of tension, the famine, starting in verse 10. The famine is severe in the land. So here's my question. Does Abraham sin by going to Egypt? What do you think? What does this tell you about Abraham? What does this tell you about the famine? Okay. Feedback.
We don't know that he prayed about it.
Okay. We have no indication that he prayed about it or even asked God what to do. We don't know. Okay. But it's certainly not listed. What else? What else do we know about Abram's decision?
There had to have been more food in Egypt for him to go there.
Sir?
There had to have been more food in Egypt for him to go there.
There definitely is more food in Egypt. Egypt is the breadbasket of the world for the next 2,000 years. Egypt is known as the breadbasket of the world. The source of the Nile is much, much further south in Africa. And the rains and even the melting snows in some parts feed into the Nile River. And so once a year at least, the Nile overflows its banks as you get near its delta. And then when it recedes, it leaves behind water and really rich soil. And Egypt feeds the empires of the world. Even in the days of Julius Caesar, Egypt was a prize to be won. All of the empires try to control Egypt because you get Egypt, it's like Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, and all of the farm country of America put together. You can feed, an army, you can feed half a nation with Egypt. You would want more. There's definitely food there. There is no food in Canaan. It's not just a famine. We are told it's a severe famine. What else do we know?
It may be a stretch, but it could show that Abraham is trusting more in the circumstances of what are happening right then in Canaan than in God's promises to bless him there.
I don't think that's a stretch at all. God has just given to Abraham a promise. In you, all the nations of the families will be blessed. All the families of the earth, will be blessed. That automatically tells Abraham that no matter what happens, Abraham is going to survive. And if Abraham understands this blessing, and I think he does, I will make of you a great nation, right? I will bless you and I will make your name great. Well, that means Abraham's got to have kids, and he doesn't have kids now, so he's got to live long enough to have kids somewhere along the line. And God tells him later on, this is the land, in verse 7, to your descendants I will give this land. Should Abraham have said, look, I know there's a severe famine, but God promised me that I'm going to live long enough to have a nation come from me, and then as a result be a blessing to the whole world. I'll stay here.
Israel.
I don't think that's a stretch.
Israel did the same thing a couple hundred years later when they moved to Egypt.
Yes.
Same severe famine.
Under Joseph.
Yeah, Joseph. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that long too?
Well, given the way it turned out, what do you think?
I think. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either. The nation of Israel is certainly promised to be the nation from which Messiah will come. At this juncture, what I'm saying is not so much that Abraham is sinning, but that it reveals a mindset of Abraham where he's looking at his circumstances, but not considering, as far as we can tell, God's promise.
So the same thing you did with Hagar.
Yeah.
He's still trying to control how, like, maybe I believe what God said, but I need to be the one that figures out how it's going to, like, line up, because he really, maybe isn't considering all of these details.
He certainly isn't having the proper mindset. Should he have stayed in Canaan? Let's give him the benefit of the doubt, just for a moment. Let's say the famine is so severe that Abram has come to the conclusion, we can't stay here and live. And let's say that's an accurate assessment. And then going to Egypt is the right thing to do. Does Abram at that point have to tell Sarah, look, they're going to kill me? Well, God promised that I'm going to be made a great nation. Do you see what I'm saying? Let me give you an analogy later on. Why is it that David is the only one who goes out to fight Goliath? One reason, David has already been anointed to be the next king, and he knows it. It's like he can go face Goliath and say, look, I'm not sure how this is going to turn out, but I know God promised me I'm going to be the next king. Samuel has already anointed me. Guess what? I'm not afraid. Abraham doesn't seem to have that mindset. He's not thinking that way. All right, the rising tension, the conflict in Abraham, verses 11 and 13. So when Abram makes this request to Sarah, his wife, I know you are a woman of beautiful countenance, and therefore it will happen when the Egyptians see you that they will say, this is his wife, and they will kill me, but they will let you live. Please say you are my sister, that it may be well for me for your sake, and that I may live because of you. Okay. What is Abram's thinking? What's his logic at this point?
Blaming her. You weren't so beautiful, I'd be alive.
Well, again, assuming just give him the benefit of the doubt that the famine is so bad that going to Egypt is somewhat warranted, at least in a common sense way. Abraham, has he not sort of limited his options at this point? Logically speaking, Abraham says, I got two options. Right? What are they?
Stay and starve.
Sorry?
Stay here and starve or go to Egypt.
Yeah, I can stay here and starve. I can go to Egypt. Now let's take going to Egypt. That breaks down into two options. Okay? Which are, tell them she's my wife and I am dead. Or, you tell them you're my sister and then we'll be okay. We'll live, we'll survive. Okay.
Well, no, I was just going back to the other point though. He's not just thinking about 3 people. He's thinking about a lot of people, which kind of adds to the fact that they're thrown into the attention of Pharaoh. They're not just going into Egypt and being overlooked because it's just 3 people. It's a whole bunch of people and a whole bunch of animals. So he's very wealthy.
Yeah, he's got servants already. He's got animals and flocks. He's not going to come into Egypt unnoticed. But he also knows he's going to get noticed because of what? Sarah. She's beautiful. Okay? And he just knows. So Abraham has done the flowchart thing in his head. All right, I got 2 options. Stay and starve, go to Egypt and live. Okay? Again, not thinking God has promised I'm going to be the father of a great nation and all the families of the earth are going to be blessed through me. That doesn't seem to shade his thinking. Stay and starve, go to Egypt and live. Okay, well, let's go to Egypt, right? Makes sense. Now we're getting ready to go to Egypt. Oh yeah, I've got this great big beautiful wife. I'm going to get noticed. I'm coming with all these flocks. Okay, now I got 2 options. Tell them she's my wife. They're going to kill me. Is that necessarily true?
No.
No. And given God's promise that he's going to be the father of a great nation and all families of the earth will be blessed, should he even have concluded that? No. But, go to Egypt, tell them she's my wife, they'll kill me for her, or we can just not tell the whole truth and then at least we get to live. What's Abram's number 1 motivation at this point?
His own survival.
Survival. Or as the Bee Gees put it, staying alive.
Survival by his own hands.
I'm sorry, what?
Survival by his own hands.
By his own hands, by his own logic. Okay.
Just flawed.
I'm sorry?
His logic is flawed, right? It's like he's all or nothing thinking instead of keeping his eyes on God.
It's what I call rationalistic logic, but it's not faith logic. And there's a difference between the two. Okay. In either scenario, what becomes of the promise that God's made to Abraham? Well, Abraham's not thinking of that promise. So, in that sense, Abram's request to Sarah is based on Abraham not having faith in God's promise. Keep that in mind. So, here's a question. Ladies, put yourself in Sarah's shoes and your husband says, look, you're a really hot chick. They're going to kill me to take you. Tell them you're my sister. they'll probably still take you, but at least I get to live. All right? How does that make you feel, ladies? What does she tell you to say, Brett?
Insecure.
I think insecure is probably the best. Angry.
She's gonna be in a harem.
She's gonna want, yeah, Pharaoh, interestingly enough, Pharaoh knows adultery is wrong, but apparently he doesn't believe that polygamy is wrong. That's the times in which they live. Even David has that problem. Okay. Would it make you not only angry, but what would you think of your husband?
The chicken,
Yeah. True story. Do any of you remember the Wedgwood Baptist Church shooting from years and years ago? The guy, I don't remember his name, but the guy that came in to start the shooting, he comes into the foyer first. There was a older couple, I think they were in their 50s, don't quote me on that, in the foyer. And he points his gun at the man, and you know what the man does? He's not armed. He hides behind his wife. Yeah. They wound up getting a divorce.
Oh, he didn't kill the man? He didn't kill them?
Didn't kill them.
Oh my God, that was the worst.
I agree. Apparently that action, I don't know if it amused the shooter or what, but for some reason he just goes off and leaves them. And then he enters the auditorium and does what he does. They wind up getting a divorce. Okay, here's Abram. Look, we got two options. We got to go to Egypt because if we stay here, we're going to starve. So we got to go to Egypt, there's food. Now when we get there, here's two things. They're either going to kill me to take you, or you can tell them you're my sister and they'll take you, but at least I get to live. Isn't that a little bit like the same thing? Abraham's mindset is survive. Just get through this thing. Live. Now, in all fairness, you know, we've heard of famines in the world before that take hundreds of thousands of lives. It was a much more common thing in his day. Abraham is familiar with people starving to death. It's not uncommon. So keep that in mind. We think famine, okay, you know, shortage of food, helicopters come in from the United States, drop off oatmeal, and you know, no, it doesn't work that way. So he's thinking survival. Okay, now where does this? Let's see. Well, let's go to scene 3. I have no idea what time it is.
10:10.
Okay. So scene 1 is our backdrop versus, you know, our prologue, if you will. Scene 2 is the rising tension. There's a famine in the land. They have to go to Egypt. Okay. Scene 3, now we get to this point where the conflict begins to reach a boiling point, and that starts at verse 14. So it was when Abram came into Egypt that the Egyptians saw the woman, that she was very beautiful. The princes of Pharaoh also saw her and commended her to Pharaoh. And the woman was taken to Pharaoh's house. He treated Abram well for her sake. He had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male and female servants, female donkeys, and camels. Yeah, Sarah, you know, I know you got taken into Pharaoh's house, but man, look how many camels I got. I'll just throw that. It is interesting to me in verse 14. Well, actually, go back to verse 11. Abraham says to Sarah, I know you are a woman of beautiful countenance. Okay? You have a beautiful face. But the Egyptians see the woman in verse 14 that she was very beautiful. Just throw that out. Abraham has, oh yeah, you look gorgeous, babe. You know, the pharaohs are like, Egyptians, wow. They're really impressed. You know, maybe Abraham's gotten a little used to seeing it. Okay. The princes of Pharaoh see her and commend her to Pharaoh. Why? Well, they think she's Abraham's sister. Okay. Princes don't commend somebody to Pharaoh unless they are pretty certain she's a standout. Now, they're trying to curry Pharaoh's favor by making this recommendation. But they have to be sure. I'm trying to remember who it was. Henry VIII, on his fourth wife, is Anne of Cleves. She is what we would today call German, but she's from a German/Lutheran background. But when she gets to England, Henry looks at her and says, "She does not please me." She was not as beautiful as Henry VIII was used to seeing. Okay? So, Anne Boleyn is number 2. I'm trying to remember who number 3 is. It's another Catherine. Catherine Howard, I think. Yeah. It's the one who actually has a son, and then she dies shortly after childbirth. And then number 4 is Anne of Cleves. And she apparently is just average. The counselor that recommends the marriage to Anne of Cleves gets in trouble. How dare you recommend to me a plain Jane, or in this case a plain Anne? Okay? So, the princes of Pharaoh, they recommend her. The woman, they don't call her Sarah at this point. The woman was taken to Pharaoh's house. The way the Hebrew word itself is pretty vague. It can mean to take, to receive, can even almost mean to invite. But in the particular tense that it's used, it's a causative and a passive. Literally, it says the woman was taken, but literally, the woman was caused to be taken. Okay? Meaning that there's a certain force involved. Pharaoh sends a counselor with some soldiers, and Sarah is taken. All right. What position is Sarah in at this point? Well, how would you feel if a group of men show up and take you from your husband and take you to Pharaoh's house? Most likely into the house of the women, which means like a harem. And now you say to yourself, what's going on here? I'm going to wind up being part of Pharaoh's harem the rest of my life. I can clear this up if I just tell him what's going on. What's Sarah's options? She can stay quiet, which is what she does apparently. She can tell Pharaoh, look, I really am his wife. Thinking what Abraham has said. If you tell them that, they're going to kill me. And Sarah can go, look, it's your fault, dummy. If they kill you, fine. She can be quiet and become a part of Pharaoh's harem, maybe even one of Pharaoh's favorites. Now, I know that being part of a harem isn't exactly a great dignity, but in those days, there's a lot of power involved with being, especially if you could be one of his favorites. She's passing up a very comfortable life. I don't have to live in tents in Canaan. I can be in Pharaoh's palace. I can be one of his favorites. You know, she's this foreign, exotic beauty. Those are her options. There are some women who would find that position enviable. Okay. She's flattered. She's beautiful. But apparently she never tells Pharaoh. And the reason I say that is this. Verse 18, when Pharaoh comes to Abraham and says, "What is this you have done? Why did you not tell me she was your wife?" Abraham never tells him. And Pharaoh never figures it out until God plagues his house. Apparently, Sarah never says a word, at least not immediately. All right, final confrontation. Verse 17, the Lord plagues Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarah, Abram's wife. And Pharaoh called Abram and said, "What is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister? I might have taken her as my wife. Now therefore, here is your wife. Take her and go your way." Pharaoh at this point is at least pretending a certain amount of integrity. He is at least in his words saying, look, I might have married her as one of my wives. She wasn't going to be a concubine. She wasn't going to be in the harem. She was actually going to be married to Pharaoh. I might have married her. Look at what you did. And you never told me she was your wife. Basically what Pharaoh is saying, look, if you had just told me, this would have never happened. And Abraham, it's all your fault. I think Pharaoh's overplaying his hand. Pharaoh is a lustful pagan king who is just, beautiful woman, she's mine. There's a pride, there's an arrogance involved here. But nonetheless, Pharaoh's, even if he is overplaying his hand, I might have taken her as my wife. He's aware that adultery is wrong, although polygamy is not. But in essence, he's telling Abraham that his stunt almost caused a disaster. Now, why is Pharaoh acting this way? What's Pharaoh's motivation?
Punishment.
I'm sorry? I had three at once.
Plagues.
The plagues. God has plagued his house, and we have no idea what the plague is. But obviously, somewhere along the line, from the day that Sarah comes in, whatever these plagues are begin to afflict Pharaoh's household. And being the religious and superstitious people that they are, eventually Pharaoh would have called for his religious counselors. What's going on? What does Osiris say, Isis say, what do the gods say, what do the birds say, whatever. And somebody would have put two and two together and said, look, before this foreign woman came into your house, everything's fine. She comes in and boom, the plagues start. And we still don't know how Pharaoh figures out that Sarah is Abram's wife. Probably, and please note I say probably because the Bible doesn't tell us, probably Pharaoh goes to Sarah and Sarah tells him. That's what a lot of the old commentators say, but we don't know that for sure. Somehow he figures it out, and then he goes and confronts Abraham. Okay. Let's talk about Sarah and Abraham for a moment. How would you classify Abraham in this story in regards to his faith?
Not very strong.
Not very strong. Okay. What does Sarah say in Genesis 12? Say it real loud.
Nothing.
Nothing. There is not one word recorded of Sarah's speech in Genesis 12. Nothing. Why is Sarah and Abraham in this position other than the famine? Because Sarah is what?
Beautiful.
Beautiful. Okay. What does Sarah not do? She doesn't panic. She doesn't turn on her husband. She doesn't get even. Apparently what Sarah does is nothing. Which means she's trusting God. I'm not saying it's a vibrant faith. I'm not saying it's that she's a giant of the faith at this point, but she's stuck, and all she can do is say, "Okay, God, you figure it out. You whatever." And she obeys her husband, right? And she's in a position where God has to rescue her. Now, what are the characteristics of 1 Peter chapter 3? The husband does what? He's not obeying the word. What's Abraham doing? He's not exactly believing and obeying the word, is he? What does Sarah say in Genesis 12? Nothing. What does 1 Peter 3 say? Without a word. What does 1 Peter 3 say about a woman's looks? Don't use your beauty to get what you want. What is Sarah in Genesis 12? Very beautiful. But she apparently does not use that. Genesis 12, Sarah doesn't panic. She doesn't give up on God. As far as we know, she does nothing except just wait on God. And 1 Peter 3, as long as you are not afraid with any terror, just like Sarah. When you get to 1 Peter 3, Peter's points about what a wife is supposed to do is built on the example of Sarah from Genesis chapter 12. I believe it. Because he says, just like Sarah did, obeying Abraham. So, how far does a wife's submission extend? Even if he's not obeying the word like Abraham. Even if you are beautiful and you can have any guy you want. Don't use your beauty against your husband. Don't use it for your own benefit. Don't be afraid. Don't let terror and anxiety and fear start to control you. And without a word, obey your husband just like Sarah did. That's how far it extends. Questions or comments on the whole thing? Rick?
If Sarah weren't truly his sister, she would not have gone along with it, right?
Hypothetical question, which are always difficult, but if Sarah were not truly Abraham's sister in any respect, would she have gone along with it? I don't think so. But the better question is, should she have lied at that point? The answer is no. A husband has no right to ask his wife or command his wife to do something that violates God's law. Okay.
And the second thing is, after Pharaoh gave him his wife back, can you imagine what he must have felt? Chastised
Yeah.
by a pagan. And then his wife.
There is a, what's the word I'm after? A meta-narrative, a trend from Genesis 12 forward of how often Abraham doesn't really have full, solid faith in God. Up until the point where after Isaac is born, and then God says to Abraham, go and sacrifice your only son. Abraham is this example of faith, but he's also an example of growing faith. Faith that's very small and somewhat weak. And as Abraham's story progresses, you see his faith getting stronger. In Genesis, is it 15 or 17? Okay? God takes Abraham out and says, look at the stars. This is what your seed will be, like the stars of heaven. And Abraham says, oh, that Eliezer, my steward, would be counted. And God says, no, not this one from your own body. Even then, Abraham is still doubting God to some degree. He doesn't get this full, perfected, mature faith until after Isaac is born. So, there you go. Translation. You won't really have strong faith until you're old. No, I'm not. It's a growth process for anybody. So, 1 Peter 3, wives, be submissive to your own husbands, that even if some do not obey the word, you without a word, they may be won by the conduct of the wives, even as Sarah obeyed Abraham. I don't imagine this was real good for their marriage. You know? But who are you going to go to for marriage counseling at that point? Lot? Well, I don't think so. Not Pharaoh.
I was going to say, I know this says separate principle, but prior to Abraham making the decision of what they were going to do, it's not necessarily wise for Sarah to never say anything, right?
It's not wise of Sarah to what?
To never say anything, like, are you sure? Before he's made his decision.
That's my question too.
Yeah,
So that's like a separate principle.
That's certainly a separate principle. When I say that Sarah doesn't say a word and she's not recorded as saying anything, I don't think you necessarily read that as there's no discussion. It's that there's no dissension. And there's a difference. What?
It's a compliment.
Maybe it's just my mind, but in my mind, the thing that amazes me most is that when Sarah gets taken in and Pharaoh says, I might have taken her as a wife, not a concubine, wife. But Sarah doesn't go, yes, I will marry you, Pharaoh, and oh, by the way, my brother, let's see if we can't throw him in prison for about 2 years, She doesn't. She could have. You talk about getting even. You talk about the ultimate revenge. Wow, she could have had it and used her beauty to get it. And she doesn't. So yes, before the final decision is made, I am quite certain that there could have been and maybe was some discussion going on. That's not sinful. But at some point a decision is made, and when that happens, there's no dissension. And that's very admirable of Sarah. Any others? All right. Next week we'll come back and wrap up a little bit more about Sarah and 1 Peter 3, 1 through 6. And then, Lord willing, we'll start on verse 7, and we'll start helping the husbands understand their duty. All right, let's close in prayer. Father, we bless you and thank you for your word. Ask now that you will be with us. Father, be with us in worship, that we may be under your word and submit to it. That, Father, just as your own Son submitted to your own word and your own will, may we do the same. May we take our worship seriously, and yet do so with a spirit of joy and thanksgiving that our sins are forgiven through Christ. In His name we pray. Amen.